with these young people in their 20s and 30s, and we're going to do a day on ethics. And in the morning, we're going to the newspaper and the TV station to talk about journalistic ethics. In the afternoon, we want to talk about business ethics. Could you give us a talk on business ethics? We've heard your classes are the most popular at the university. And well, instead of saying, well, I've never studied ethics or business ethics, instead of saying you're calling the wrong guy, there's somebody else you ought to be talking to, I said, okay, let me look into it. I'll put together something for you. That's the secret of my life, Jackie, is saying okay to stuff I'm not qualified for and then making myself qualified. And so I gave a talk. Everybody there said, oh, you got to come to my civic club. You got to come to my business. You got to come to my church and give that same talk. Okay. So I'm giving free talks all over South Bend, Indiana. And then an Oldsmobile dealer calls me, an automobile dealer. We have a regional meeting once a year in the Midwest. We have a motivational speaker every year. Set goals, believe in yourself, you can do it. There's got to be something deeper than that, right? Did the philosophers ever talk about success? And rather than saying, well, I have no idea, that's not the kind of stuff I studied at Yale, I said, well, let me look into it. So Jackie, because of that, I ended up discovering the forgotten side of philosophy, the practical side of philosophy. You go into a philosophy classroom in a university, how do we know we exist, Or today our lecture is on epistemology, the logic of knowledge and belief, and how evidence relates to theories. And it's all this theoretical stuff. And it's like, there were philosophers in the ancient world who talked about success and happiness and anger and adversity and all these practical things. And in our desire to be like the sciences, we've left those topics behind. And we're engaged in complicated arguments using modal logic and all sorts of things. I want to rediscover this practical side and really look into it. And that's what's been my career ever since. And it was businesses that asked me to do it. And it was businesses that after 2 years started offering to pay me to do it. And at a certain point, I was making more from these speeches for my family than I was from being a professor. And I said, and then soon it got to be the point that they would pay me for an hour what Notre Dame would pay me for a year.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, even if this is not a sustainable enterprise, if I just do it for a while, we're okay. And like I say, that was 26 years ago, and still we're going with this enterprise.
Yeah, I mean yeah. So is it that kind of teacher speaker kind of? There's a connection there, isn't there? That you were saying earlier that you came to speaking quite naturally, you came to presenting quite naturally.
Yeah.
But that's what you do in front of a class, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And oddly enough, one of the top agents at the Washington Speakers Bureau, where I was an exclusive speaker with all the famous politicians from, it'd be Margaret Thatcher and me, or it would be George W. Bush and me, or Colin Powell and me. I was the who's he amongst the who's who for many years. One of the top agents there said, professors make the worst public speakers. You're an exception. I said, why? And he said, professors think it's their job to provide as much information as possible during the hour. You realize that's not the job. The job is to have the biggest positive impact in the hour, and information is subordinate to that. I said, wow, yeah, that's kind of what I try to do. Impact first, And it's funny because I played, you can see behind me on kind of both sides of me here, guitars, amplifiers. I played in bands before I was a philosopher. So I was accustomed to being in front of thousands of people. And to me, to be a professor and then to be a public speaker is trying to bring that energy, that enjoyment, that experience to people for the sake of wisdom and ideas they can use. So it's always going to be fun. And I mean, I've done over the years, I've had speeches in front of 3,000 and 5,000 and 10,000 people where they jump to their feet afterwards, and they're not just clapping, they're stomping their feet, they're yelling, they're whistling. It's like being in a concert. Who thought that philosophy could have that effect when it's done the right way?
Absolutely.
It can have amazing effects. So yeah, everything in my past prepared me for this. As my father used to say to me, who was a high school graduate, 12th grade, 12 grades of school, never went to college. He said, life is supposed to be a series of adventures. The one you're on now is preparing you for the next one in ways you often can't imagine. Yeah. Likewise, who knew that being a guitarist in bands would prepare me to be a public philosopher? You don't just connect those dots easily.
No,